Hello, everybody, listeners, far and I was going to say far and large. That's wrong. Far and near. Um, this is Real Talk with Jesse and Sherrod, and I'm joined by my fabulous co-host Jesse. Hello, Jesse.
Hello, how are you?
Doing well. We're recording on a Monday, which always has its dangers. So
What?
doing the best for a Monday. How about you?
The same, the same.
Well, Jesse and I are so excited that we have our colleague Erin Sims on to have some real talk with us. Hello, Erin.
Hello, Sherrod and Jesse. Thank you so much for having me.
We're so excited to have you on. Erin Sims is our wonderful director of outreach and advocacy at Via Link, the nonprofit Jesse and I work at, where the real talk goes down. Um, it has been so amazing having Erin join our team because we actually then had this fantastic staff member who does have such an interest and dedication to advocacy and just already came with this amazing passion and skill set for keeping up with media, keeping up with policy, and keeping up with the ever dreaded legislative session, which I know everybody is exhausted by this time of year. So, big thank you to Erin that she spends her time at the Capitol for us and also dedicates a lot of time to creating bill trackers and things of that nature so that other community members that we work with or part of coalitions with have an easy way to keep up with what's going on in our legislative session here in Louisiana. That is, but Erin also keeps up with news, media, stuff from all over the place. So I've given a really informal introduction to Erin, but Erin, would you mind giving us some of your professional history, kind of how you got here, and what really sparked your interest in keeping up and keeping informed with legislation?
Yes, definitely. And thank you for the introduction, Sherrod. I am really happy to be a part of the VLink team and love the work that we do and enjoy working with everyone on our outreach and advocacy efforts. So, yeah, I am Erin Sims. I'm originally from Alabama. I've been a school-based mental health professional for the past decade, mainly in Louisiana. And I started out my career providing mental health and kind of wraparound case management support to kids in schools in New Orleans. And around the time of the pandemic, I was feeling a little burned out. School-based work was really challenging. I had a young son, and so I had always been interested in advocacy and been interested in just politics for some reason. Even though it can cause you to be stressed, it's always just been a natural interest of mine. I minored in political science when I was in college, and I had taken students at the school that I was working at in New Orleans when I was a counselor to an advocacy day at the Capitol, and it participated in advocacy events like with youth and young people. And I just really thought that it just was exciting and something different. And so the organization I was at prior to Veeling, I helped write a grant to fund the position I had. And I just kind of started doing this work from there and met awesome people like Sherrod along the way and other people doing outreach around the state. And it just kind of clicked for me. And so I've been doing this work for the past 5 years and was lucky enough to get the opportunity to come to Veeling in November. So I have experience in mental health and just health policy, school-based health policy, suicide prevention, public health in general. And yeah, just kind of really enjoy that work and enjoy going to Baton Rouge. It's an all the time sort of job in terms of connecting with people, but we definitely are in the thick of it with the legislative session right now in April through June this year. So I think that's a little bit about my background and why and how I got to this point.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us.
So, Erin, if you don't, am I frozen?
No.
You were, but
Okay,
you're good
sorry.
now.
All right, my bad. Um, so Erin, if you don't mind us and just like picking your brain a little bit, um, for people who are interested in maybe kind of starting to keep up with legislation, maybe looking at policy local to them, what are some good resources that you found to be able to utilize to sort of get more information if you're looking into bills or laws going on around you?
Totally, yeah. So I think a great there's a few different places to start, and I think based on how much info you want to know or how into this you want to be, that can kind of help you choose your resource or choose your first place to start. So the Louisiana Legislature has a website. It's at legis.la.gov, I believe, and I will definitely make sure that y'all have that info to be able to share with anyone listening. But you can create an account on the legislature's website and you can track legislation from there. You can see committee schedules. You can figure out who your representatives are based on your zip code, and you can see what different committees they belong to. You can look up all of, our past bills, our past legislation from sessions and read the language. You can see how the different votes went and all of that. So it's kind of, I would say, just, a public resource that's available to anyone in Louisiana or not to kind of get an idea of what's going on with the legislature and with all of the different, activities that they have. But then there's some other websites for people who are more, maybe this is their job or they're more interested. They can kind of help you go a little bit deeper and are just maybe a little bit more, like I would say, user friendly or have a little bit more easy access. The state's website is, of course, a state-run website, so it gives you a ton of information, but it's not incredibly fancy. But some of the other websites and programs and softwares that you can actually purchase to monitor legislation if you want to for your organization or for yourself. But there's also free resources. So I primarily use legiscan.com, which is a website that's also I'm able to create an account through my nonprofit email address that I have through work. So I do have a free account. And it can also, similar to our legislative website, give you tracking of bills. I kind of like it because it gives you percentage for the bills that you follow. It will say like this bill's 25% through the process. And so it does some things like that that I think for me just help me stay engaged and maybe better understand the process, because it is sometimes the jargon that's used or sometimes meetings are scheduled very last minute. So any way that you can get the information quickly or just kind of as efficiently as possible, to me helps you kind of create some shortcuts, because there's a lot of information. It's very overwhelming. There's tons of bills. It's all very fast moving. So using some of these websites can help you stay on top of things. It can also help you see support for certain issues. Maybe you look up a bill that passed 5 years ago. You can still see how that bill was voted for, and who voted for what and how it those types of different things. Also on Legiscan, it has a feature to be able to see what committees have the most bills, which I always think is very interesting. It also can let you know which representatives have introduced the most bills. So that kind of, I think, is also just interested to see state politics, reps from your area, how many bills are they introducing, what type of legislation, both of those websites are great. And then there's another website, Ballotpedia, sorry. That one's hard for me to say for some reason. And I always want to say Ballotopedia, but it's just Ballotpedia. And so it's similar to the different types of legislation, but it also kind of gives you more information. It gives you information on all the legislation things and all the different breakdowns, but it also gives you information on districts in terms of, what parishes are in a certain district, or where is that district, what type of different information about how Senate districts and House districts are broken down. And sometimes that can be a little bit hard to understand, especially if you live in rural areas, who's your representative and who represents what areas. So again, just like another great website. And that one's .org. I'm sorry, Sherrod, I think I might have said .com on that one. So those, I think, are the kind of the websites that come to mind. I am sure there's tons more. Those are just the ones that I've been able to gravitate towards and that I've gotten, that I know other people use and that have been kind of recommended to me when I started this. I think another great way to stay informed is to sign up for local newsletters or even national newsletters. So if you care a lot about suicide prevention or, topics around crisis prevention, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, AFSP, has a policy alert email that you can get. And so different organizations like that, depending on what issues you're interested in, Louisiana Budget Project sends out an email called the Daily Dime, where they discuss different tax and budget issues, which is not kind of my world that I live in. So I love getting that email because it kind of gives me a digestible bite-sized information about what's going on in the budget world, which is important to me and is critical to know, but isn't always my everyday exposure in the policy world. So following up and signing up for things like that can kind of push information into your inbox. You can read them at your leisure. And also it's a way to kind of bite-size things and not feel so overwhelmed. And I just have over time figured out different organizations that cover different issues that are important to me personally and also professionally. And I always just try to sign up for their newsletter or their kind of action updates, or action alerts might be what they're called. Yeah, and I think that's another great way that I have found is really helpful. And again, you don't have to do anything. They send it to your inbox.
And don't we love, and we will, like Erin mentioned, be linking all of these in the description of the episode. So check that out. And we will be double checking them because I just realized I do not know how to spell ballot as I was trying to create
It's a hard
Ballotpedia.
one. It trips me up too.
So solidarity on that name
Yes.
being hard.
Yeah, I don't think I could spell it either. I was trying to do it in my head. I was like, no, I can't spell that. But thank you for sharing all those resources. I think it'll be very helpful for people who definitely want to get that information. So I do appreciate that. Also, we know it's been a short session this year. What has it been like for you at the Capitol so far?
Yes, so it is a short session, and I was there 3 days last week. There for the first day. We also had some of our great partners having specific days at the Capitol of Advocacy. So CASA Day was last week, Go Far Day, which is the Early Childhood Coalition, and then it was also Black Maternal Health Day at the Capitol. So there was lots of great activity and tons of great organizations. It felt like a nice week, actually, for me personally to start. But there was also a lot of talk about money. And I think that that always kind of can create some tension. We have none of the bills that we're tracking in our mental health lane have been scheduled to be heard, are on the schedule yet, but that can change quickly. So we are watching that. But right now, I feel like it's been a little bit of a slow start, mainly talks about money, especially with what's going on at the federal level and not knowing how that might cuts to federal budgets, especially around Medicaid funding, would have really significant impacts for Louisiana. And we about 70% of the health department here's the state health department's budget is through the federal government. So cuts, there would really deeply impact us, and we don't know the full fallout of that. So I think that was kind of talked about a good bit, but it was great to start off the week with some of our awesome partners and have a lot of buzz around those different topics of advocating for children, advocating for moms. Those are all things that I think are issues that we care a lot about and want to see people also caring a lot about. So it is a short session. With it being the fiscal session, representatives can only bring 5 bills that aren't related to taxation or fiscal policy. So it really limits the amount of different social policies or different policies, that might be related to education or the environment. Things like that are really limited because only 5 bills per representative. So there is, that makes the session short in some ways, but also because it's money, that never means it's not without drama and without twists and turns and surprises. So I think for us in our world of family, children, mental health, public health advocacy, it was a nice start last week. And I'm, excited to keep going back. We have a busy week next week with a lot of our mental health days and then a day around hunger awareness. So it's all kind of jam-packed this year, but it's been exciting so far. And I think it will really start being important to pay attention next week, probably. These first 2 weeks are kind of slow. I would say, again, like the bills we're following haven't been heard, but next week things will start getting going and they'll get going pretty fast. So I think that's when most people start paying attention, or that's when I'm going to try to start really buckling down and paying attention.
Oh wow. Well, it seems like it's a little bit stressful too. So I was going to ask you, since it can be a since it is a shorter session, and you're got a lot of jam-packed stuff in a week, and two, how do you find balance in keeping up with media and legislation and monitoring its impact on your stress level?
Yes, definitely. I think that that's something I've tried to be really aware of because I think as a mental health professional in the past, I've had some blind spots with that and maybe not understood how things impact you or how being, in an environment that can be really stressful. I think a way I like to, or a way I've thought about it is like losing sight of your limit. Sometimes when you're in a stressful situation, you kind of lose sight of what your limit is or like your red line of where you need a break or where you need to intervene. And so I think it's really important to be careful in those situations, know what your limit is, be reminding yourself of those limits and paying really close attention to them. I I have it's this is a negative and a positive, but I have a little bit of a commute to Baton Rouge, and I think a lot of people do because I think I was saying this before we started recording, but people come from all over the state, right? And many of them don't live close to Baton Rouge. I live about an hour, 20, 30 minutes from Baton Rouge. So that is time in the morning and then time in the afternoon that I'm in my car by myself. On the way there, I usually try to like check in with family or maybe catch up on some phone calls to different people that I haven't talked to. I definitely listen to podcasts and books about different topics that aren't related to my work. Sometimes they are if I'm really interested in something. I try to find balance too there and not just consume podcasts or books that are related to my work because sometimes that can happen. But I try to think about that commute maybe as not a negative, but as a time to kind of shed off some of those things. And I think that maybe other people do as well who work in Baton Rouge because it's really nice after an hour and a half in the car of either catching up with my mom or my aunt or talking to a friend or listening to a podcast about something totally random. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts about how different things work that I don't know anything about, like scuba diving and, different things like that. I'm a parent, so sometimes I listen to things about like managing toxic sport parents because my kid loves to play sports, but it's hard to navigate those things. So, I do stuff like that. And then I find that that kind of helps give me some space. And I also, sometimes will debrief with a colleague. I'm very lucky to have Sherrod as someone, that I can call. And I have other colleagues too that I can just call and say, like, am I on solid ground? Like that was wild, or I can't believe that person said that, or I felt a type of way about this and I want to be able to let it go and I can't, or whatever, just having the space to process it with a colleague. I try to, once I've done that, I try to tell myself, I trust myself, I trust them. And so I'm going to let it go after this conversation, when I'm consulting or when I'm getting like a second opinion about maybe how something went down. I also go to therapy. I'm a big advocate for being in therapy when you have stressful life things going on, and working in politics is just, it's going to be stressful in our political climate. I think it will be stressful at any point in history, honestly. But having worked in a school and, just some of the other experiences from my job, it is helpful for me to stay in therapy, even if it's not every week, even if sometimes, it's every other month or, just checking in, but having, someone consistent, that is something that is really helpful for me. And I think too, the biggest thing that I really tried to do, and I think this is what advocacy is in general, is just turning my frustrations into action and, allowing myself to be frustrated, allowing myself to feel overwhelmed or to be even really sad sometimes about the things that go on, but then trying to turn that energy into action and find the people that are doing the same because they're out there. And, democracy is not a spectator sport. We've got to get off the sidelines. And so I think that's part of it too, is that I know that it is worth keeping going. And there's lots of things to be hopeful for. So even when things don't go our way, or even when things are challenging, there's still lots of ways, I think, to find hope, to find people who are like-minded, to give myself the breaks and space, and to be a little bit softer on myself, like give myself permission sometimes to, it's not going to be perfect. My expectation can't be that. So sometimes remind myself those things and not take myself and all of it too seriously, even though it is very serious and can feel that way sometimes.
Right. Yeah, I can only imagine.
And you've hit so many points that we love to highlight for our listeners about trying to find the balance as best you can, giving yourself the permission to be distracted by something. Like, I don't have to always be listening to something, heavy when I'm commuting and have time for a podcast. I mean, whenever you call me, I'm like, I'm listening to my Real Housewives recap podcast. So
Exactly.
y'all
Yeah.
are much more intellectual than me with your decompressing podcast. But right now, the 90210 recap I'm listening to is spectacular. So
No, yeah, I definitely I keep a lot of balance. Sometimes I'll listen to like the same three songs that I love just over and over again. I
yeah.
really try to just do whatever I am feeling. And like you said, like sometimes I'll even be like, I'm distracted and can't listen to my podcast. And instead of, thinking that, just being like, maybe it's better to listen to a song and, just kind of not getting stuck in the things that can feel like they stick you. And, yeah, just reminding myself. I also find, it's nice to I try to like get some tea, like a nice tea to drink on the way home.
Yeah,
Or I didn't know if you meant
yeah.
metaphorical
Yeah,
tea. Like,
like a small coffee, like something like that on the way home. Isn't too bad either. I've tried to, kind of learn Baton Rouge. That's helped me too. What are the things I like in Baton Rouge? And try to do that too. So some days need a little bit of an indulgence.
and
I
I think,
agree.
and we wanted to touch on a little bit of just kind of recapping what we've mentioned before in some other episodes about having some recognition on the amount of stress and toll it can be on your brain in just keeping up with legislative affairs or just media or policy in general. Um, and it's tricky to balance it because typically you're keeping up with it because it's something you care about, even if it has nothing to do with your professional life, it's something affecting your personal life. So there's an added amount of stress there in trying to compartmentalize the amount of stress you're intaking, but it's also what you're doing in your personal time. So your brain doesn't always register it as that I'm not decompressing right now. So just reminding everybody that it's okay to be introspective and look at what your coping tools, how they might be affecting you in that moment. Just like Erin said, where she's like, well, I can't, this podcast is not even registering in my brain right now. I need to put on music. Even just listening for those internal cues. We've learned so much about the brain and how much easier it is now for our human brains to go into this flight out or burnout mode, our literal fight or flight response. And media consumption can play a big part in that because the way that our brains have evolved now, when we have too much stress overload, we can activate our fight or flight response based upon learned information or past information. There doesn't actually have to be an immediate danger around us. So when you're doubling up on stress and you might not have as much time for your coping mechanisms that kind of give a refresh to your brain and your body, your stress levels are going to be higher in your brain, but you're compounding all of this learned trauma that the brain could utilize to activate your fight or flight response. So it really is kind of a double-edged sword to keep in mind with that self-care is not an indulgence like we talk about here. Self-care is self-maintenance. It is keeping your brain in balance. And it's particularly hard during an increased time of stress, like it might be with states, local legislation going on, and federal. There's a lot that's coming at us. So taking the time to know that you earn your space to decompress, to regulate your brain, And sometimes the stuff that takes a little bit more time is what our brain really needs. When we're feeling overworked, overstressed, we usually can't get enough sleep. We might not feel like we have time to take that walk. We don't have time to eat like maybe a healthy meal. We got to grab some fast food. And all of that stuff is fine when it happens. But we want to remember that we're building some stress levels and try and see when can I get to that time so I can restore my brain because I deserve it because that is maintenance so that
Mhm.
I can help to level out those stress hormones in my brain. And like Erin said, to not be hard on yourself. If you do reach a point of feeling burned out, we're human. It happens. It doesn't make you not passionate enough. It doesn't make you that you don't work hard enough. It means you have a human brain. And the way to recover from that burnout is to give yourself some space to decompress, distract yourself, and restore that resiliency with some real rest and nutrients for your body to release the tension, get that gunk out.
Totally. I wish I could remember this person's name. I was in a self-care PD, a man that's a provider in New Orleans, and he said, and this has really stuck with me, that if you ever are saying to yourself, I don't have time to relax, like I don't have time to do this for myself, that should be your biggest clue that you need to do it more than any other time. That when
Yeah.
you're in those
Yeah.
moments and saying that like exact thing of like, I cannot take the time for myself, that is like your line. That's your limit. Because that's when we're already trying to, rationalize why we shouldn't. And like that should be your cue that you do. And I've tried to just, again, kind of, I can tend to just be in serious mode and have my head kind of down. And so being able to say to myself that kind of, again, just gives me the permission and makes it lighter because it can feel really hard to take a break. Even though when you look at other people, you have a lot of compassion for them and don't judge them about taking a break. That's one other thing I've tried to tell myself is that like how many times have I ever judged someone for needing a break? I don't know that I have. So again, like extend that same courtesy to myself and not judge myself so harshly.
Must have been why
Yeah.
you were so strict with me when I called you stressed out the other day because I needed to schedule like some lab work. And I was like, I don't even know when I'll have time. And she's like, no, Sherrod, this is not the message we tell ourselves. You make those appointments and I will help cover what needs to be covered at the end. And I'm like, oh, thank you. I needed that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talk a lot about self-care in our podcast because it's one of the most important subjects we think that we do cover. And I know you mentioned, Aaron, that like you have your podcast that you'll listen to, and that helps you. Is there anything else like for your self-care maintenance tools that you use, or do you have any like go-to for specific emotions or feeling words or anything like that that helps you with self-care?
Yeah, I would say, so there's like I'll start with like activities that I do. Like I am pretty active person. Like I can get a little anxious when I have idle time. So I like to like garden and I have a few things at my house that I kind of I feel like I have like never ending to-do list and I keep kind of a running list in my phone of things I can distract myself, whether it be like going outside and doing a bit of yard work, or maybe there's like a closet in my house I'm needing to organize. So that's like a thing I try to do throughout the day, no matter where, like if I'm at home or if I am after work, kind of just like taking a break to really do something that gets me out of like the more emotional side of my brain and into almost kind of the organizing and kind of just like the quick gratification of being able to see that I pulled the weeds out of the pot in the front of my house. Like that's something that can give me like a really quick boost during the day. I think too, one of the things that I try to do with people, is kind of, and this again is stuff that I feel like I've picked up from other people, podcasts and things that I've read, is like just reminding myself that I'm okay and reminding myself that the other person is okay. Like if I'm feeling a really strong inclination in a meeting or in a time, like in a committee hearing where maybe somebody says something and it makes me initially just kind of I try to remind myself like I'm good and they're good. And like that's the assumption that I need to start from. And that advocacy um, to me isn't about trying to convince the people that are not convincible. It's about trying to build a community around the things you want to see and to be someone that talks about that and says the truths of that and says what that means to you and listens when other people are talking, even if you don't agree. I think my thoughts about that have changed over time, but I think again, just kind of reminding myself that fundamentally we are humans and that we have so much more in common than we have different, and that I think sometimes in situations where I initially want to kind of maybe like when my claws come out, so to speak, I just like pause. And working with kids I think really helped me with that, because I've never met a kid that I didn't find some way to connect with, because kids are easy to get to know. They are innocent in so many ways, and I feel like they're ours to take care of, all of them. So I just kind of also try to extend that same courtesy to adults that can be really frustrating to me,
Mm.
and just kind of try to see them as I would a kid. And that doesn't mean that they get a pass. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't be accountable for things they say or do that are harmful. But I think, again, when I think about self-care and when I think about finding ways to move forward in this work, that's a big one for me, is, just being able to kind of doing advocacy work is a lifetime of coming back to the table, even when you don't want to. And so I think, kind of taking the space you need, but then, figuring out how to be ready to do that. And if you're not the one that's ready to do that, how do you tag in the appropriate people? You are not, again, in any job, you are not the only person that should be responsible. And if you are, that's a problem with your job, not you. So I think, trying to find who can you figure out and who can you network work with, and how do you build that community outside of your job. Sherrod and I totally built our relationship online. We worked online, we met online, we had meetings online, and we would see each other in person. But I think it was really a testament to just being like, oh, you're doing things that make me feel good and make me feel positive and happy about this work. And I kind of moved towards those things. And I think that's helped me a lot with my self-care too, is moving towards places that are supportive in this work, because this work is inherently so challenging. Working in mental health in general, working in serving people, just a people facing job, a public facing job is hard, it's a lot. So I think, not all places are going to be great work environments. So, not feeling stuck, not feeling like you're the problem, and looking for those connections is like a big part of my self-care. In addition to, just like I said, the gardening, like I do work out, I go swimming, I go for walks, I try to stay active. It's super hot where I live, so that can be challenging throughout the year. But I also can really notice when I don't do those things. I can really notice if I take a week off from like going outside and walking just even one time in my neighborhood. And I also around my house, I notice when I'm not maybe doing those things. So kind of, again, being gentle, not judging myself, but noticing I need to get back on track, and kind of bite-sizing it when I need to, so it doesn't feel overwhelming.
I really love your perspective you're coming from, Erin. And I know it's your perspective, but you put it so eloquently and in so many ways. And I'm really appreciative of it. I think especially those reminders about advocacy, or even just keeping in touch, like sometimes being a part of the conversation, it can be easy to get so caught up in the stress of thinking that your role for being an advocate or an ally even is, I've got to convince other people they're wrong and this is right. And that adds so much more stress and divisiveness, really. And it can be hard not to be that way. But yeah, having that perspective of being like, I'm building a community and my thought is a part of this community as well. And that was just really helpful for me to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of different ways to be an advocate. And that's how, when I first started this, I had a very kind of rigid idea of the definition. And then I realized, like, oh, there's lots of different styles to this. Some people come in and have presentations and data. And then some people just come in and are almost goofy and share their personal experiences. And they all connect with different legislators or different people in different ways. So I think that, that's what's always felt most genuine to me and kept me from not just being angry, because being on any side of any issue, it's frustrating. Like, you want to be persuasive, you want to get your point across. But also, there is a lot of frustration in that for me personally. And I think if you find frustration in kind of trying to, or if you find yourself getting in those power struggles, or find yourself trying to feel like I'm trying to convince someone that I just am never going to convince, I think there's other ways to feel like you can advocate, and other ways, to feel like you're being getting things accomplished, and not just going along with the status quo, not necessarily not holding people accountable, but also, like you said, Cher, just not having to have everything be confrontational or a fight or negative, because it does really, obviously change, just change our ability, I think, to move forward as a group. And we see that a lot, I think, is just a lot of divisiveness, a lot of like us and them, a lot of very wrong and right, good and bad. And I think when we think like that, we miss a lot. And we miss some of the things that are beyond those very rigid ways of thinking.
And we know when it comes to policy, to advocacy for, standing by your beliefs and trying to help others to learn, to expand, to grow. Sometimes that can feel really isolating and like you're alone as well. And we just want to remind everybody again, as we often do on our podcast, that you are never alone and you matter. And that 988 is available 24 hours a day for you. You can text or call 988 anywhere in the US, and you will get connected to your local 988 center. For a big portion of Louisiana, that's us here at Via Link. For the other part of Louisiana, you've got LACG. All of Louisiana is covered by our two 988 centers, and you're reaching people who care about you and they want to listen to you, and they want to help you come to a place where you feel like you're in control and that you can keep yourself safe if that is what you're going through. You do not have to be having thoughts of suicide to use 988. We are there for whatever you're going through. Whenever you're feeling like you need to get something off your chest and you don't know where to turn and it's starting to become overwhelming, reach out to 988. We're there for emotional support. We are also there for thoughts of suicide and suicide risk in any degree. So truly, nothing is too big or too small to give 988 a call. And I just came up with this one. Do not hesitate, dial 988.
Oh,
So,
that's an excellent.
right?
Love it.
Yeah.
So, there is no wrong reason to call, unless you're prank calling. Don't do that. It's not cool. Some people do that sometimes.
Yeah.
Really, you'd be
Please don't do
surprised.
that. Yeah.
But yeah, please don't do that. But sorry, it's not even funny, but you shouldn't do that. Now I'm lost. Okay. Well, thank you, Erin, for coming on
Thank
on board on Zoom with us and having some real talk with us. And thank you so much for sharing so much with us about how you keep track of your self-care, and also for sharing with our listeners how they might find some avenues to monitor policy, look at advocacy, whatever might work for them in their lives.
Yes, if
Yeah,
you're
thank
at the
you.
Capitol and you see me, say hello, please.
Yeah, Erin's always very friendly, so you can find her. She's the one with beautiful curly hair. And she's tall, or I think she's tall because I'm short. All right, Jesse and I have neglected to do this for we don't know how many episodes, but let's try our sign off. Jesse, are you ready?
You're ready.
All right, there's no filters,
Dude, no fluff. Just real
just
talk.
real
What
talk. I forgot it for a second.
happened?
We nailed it, as always.
Yeah, we did perfect. It was great.
It's part of our self-care to say that we've nailed it. All right. Thank y'all for being with us. And we will catch y'all next time on Real Talk. Thank you so much again, Erin.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.